what's up, everybody? True Boxing here. Thank you for coming back to get hit with the truth. So today we are doing the fantasy heavyweight tournament rankings, and this is going to be on my number 13 heavyweight based on a point system from the last 25 years. The former two-time WBA heavyweight champion, John the Quiet Man Ruiz. Now, before we get into that, if you could smash the like button, leave a comment, or subscribe to the channel, I really do appreciate any and all support that I can get as I continue to build my channel here. So, before we talk about Ruiz, again, this tournament is coming. It's starting in a few days once I get through my breakdowns of each fighter in the tournament. Again, it's through YouTube and Facebook. So let's talk about the quiet man, John Ruiz, who most people were not a fan of, myself included. But, you know, you have to respect what this guy accomplished. I'm going to say this at the beginning and the end of this video. So let's get into John Ruiz. Ruiz kind of was a workman-like type heavyweight who lost a couple fights. He lost 3 fights before he was really even a contender. He had been defeated by some unknown fighter that never really amounted to much, but he was undefeated at the time, early on. Then he went on to lose to Donnell Nicholson by a split decision. The first fight was a split decision loss. Then in '96, any hopes of really bursting onto the major scene kind of got put to rest for a couple years when he got laid out by David Tua in the very first round of the very first minute of the very first round. But after that, he went on a big winning streak. And in, what was it, about 1998, he got an 11th round TKO victory over former heavyweight champion Tony Tucker, who was still banging around at the time. And that kind of got people to look at him a little bit, but he still hadn't really accomplished much. So in 2000, after defeating a fighter named Thomas Williams, he was the #1 ranked contender in the WBA. He was a mandatory challenger to the undisputed champion Lennox Lewis, who had just defeated Evander Holyfield in November of '99 in their rematch. So Ruiz was due to fight Lennox, but Lennox decided to fight Michael Grant instead, an undefeated American fighter, and the title was stripped away from Lennox. So the vacant belt would go on the line in August of 2000 when Ruiz would get the biggest fight of his career against former 3-time heavyweight champion of the world, Evander Holyfield. And Ruiz went in there as an underdog and surprised many by outworking Holyfield and seemingly deserved a decision, but the judges came back with a controversial unanimous decision win for Holyfield, naming Holyfield the 4-time heavyweight champion of the world, becoming the only man to ever do that, and robbing John Ruiz essentially of the victory. But Holyfield, never to be one that likes to have controversy, 7 months later decided to rematch John Ruiz in March of 2001. And John Ruiz's moment had come. In this fight, he boxed and outworked Holyfield again. This time he made it more convincing. And then in the 11th round, I think it was the 11th round, he left no doubt when he dropped Holyfield. Holyfield would get up and finish the fight, but John Ruiz would take a deserving 12-round unanimous decision in the rematch and become the WBA heavyweight champion of the world. At the time, a lot of people were excited by Ruiz. They were. But the money, with Lennox Lewis focused on a showdown with Mike Tyson, the money was there in the interest for a third fight with Holyfield. Holyfield was a big money maker. This guy could really put money in a fighter's pocket. So Ruiz, already feeling like he beat Holyfield twice, in December of 2001 decided to make the first defense of his title against Holyfield in a third fight. And it ended up kind of being a mistake. He didn't lose, but Holyfield fought better in the third fight. It was a closer fight than the previous 2, essentially, and the fight was declared a draw. So Ruiz walked away from the trilogy kind of, you know, a lot of people were kind of just like, you know, like that. intrigue was still somewhat there, but he struggled to find a big name opponent. Then finally in July of 2002, he would make a mandatory defense against undefeated Canadian Kirk Johnson. This was an intriguing bout for me because Kirk Johnson looked like he could really pull off the victory here. And as an undefeated heavyweight, I was excited. But this ended up being a very ugly fight right here. Very ugly fight. And Kirk Johnson could not stray away from throwing low blows in this fight. Finally, after 10 rounds and multiple warnings and points being taken away, Johnson was disqualified for multiple low blows, and John Ruiz would retain his title again, but again in an uneventful manner. So the jury heading into 2003 was kind of out about John Ruiz. Not a lot of thrill there. And then Ruiz would sign on for a major fight with reigning undisputed light heavyweight champion of the world, Roy Jones Jr., who would move up from light heavyweight to challenge John Ruiz. This was an intriguing battle. Roy Jones would have come in at only 199 pounds for this fight, with John Ruiz outweighing him by over 20 pounds. That was very significant. John Ruiz was hoping to land a big shot, and early on he landed overhand right. But once that landed, Roy danced and moved and totally outboxed and outclassed John Ruiz the remainder of the fight to a convincing 12-round unanimous decision, and John Ruiz would lose the WBA heavyweight title. But Ruiz, in his next fight, 9 months later, he would get the opportunity to fight for the WBA interim heavyweight title, which is not a legitimate belt, when he would take on another former world champion, former unified world champion, Hasim Rahman. The winner was slated to fight Roy Jones. Slated to fight Roy Jones. And Roy Jones had returned to light heavyweight for a fight with Antonio Tarver, but was intrigued to return to heavyweight for a showdown with Hasim Rahman, because a lot of people thought that Rahman was going to defeat John Ruiz in this one. But John Ruiz, doing his thing in ugly style with his hitting and holding style, he was able to pull off a 12-round unanimous decision over Rahman, who couldn't figure out that holding style of Ruiz. And John Ruiz was in line to fight for the heavyweight crown. So Roy Jones, instead of a rematch that nobody wanted to see, decided to vacate his heavyweight title and would return to the light heavyweight division for his rematch with Antonio Tarver, where, in history, guys, Antonio Tarver has a lot to thank to John Ruiz for winning the fight against Rahman. That was a very significant win, because if Rahman wins, Roy Jones stays at heavyweight and battles Rahman, and Tarver doesn't get his rematch, where Tarver knocked Roy Jones out. So that has a lot to do with history right there, especially Roy Jones. So, you know, that's a little fun fact right there for you. But once Roy Jones gave up that belt, John Ruiz was upgraded to the heavyweight champion again. So he was now a two-time heavyweight champion and would start his second reign. In April of 2004, he would make the first defense of that second reign against Fresa Kendo, who had fought Chris Bird the year prior for the title and came up short by a close decision. In this one, Akendo was trying, but Ruiz's style was very frustrating for him as Ruiz held and hid. And then finally in the 11th round, Ruiz caught Akendo cold, hurt him, jumped on him, and the referee jumped in a little prematurely, but I really believe Ruiz was going to stop him no matter what in the 11th. But John Ruiz, scoring the only knockout victory of his career in a title fight, would defeat Fresa Kendo and retain his heavyweight title. Then in November of 2004, Ruiz would put his title on the line against Andrew Galata. Galata had, like Akendo, fought Chris Bird for Bird's IBF title in his prior fight. And Galata, who was a heavy underdog against Bird, actually fought his ass off against Bird in a great showdown. One of the best fights of the last 25 years, if you haven't seen it. And came up short as the fight ended in a draw. So there's a lot of people wondering if Galata was for real and if he could beat John Ruiz. And a lot of people wanted him to because of Ruiz's ugly style. And Galata went in there, and even though Ruiz was trying to pull his style, you know, was trying to do the hold and hit stuff that he does, Galata outworked Ruiz, put him down 3 times. And somehow, some way, the judges came back with a super controversial, unanimous decision victory for John Ruiz as he retained his belt again. A lot of people were upset about that performance and that decision by the judges. But be that as it may, Ruiz was still the champ, and he entered 2005 the champion. But that was the last title fight victory that Ruiz would get. As in April of 2005, he would defend his title against former cruiserweight and super middleweight champion James Lights Out Tony. Ruiz would originally lose a decision in this one, but Tony tested positive for PEDs in the fight, or marijuana. It was one of the two, I can't remember. And the title was stripped. The fight was deemed a no contest. For Ruiz, and Ruiz was given the title back. You know, the fight was declared a no contest. So from there, Ruiz would set up his next title defense, which was a mandatory defense against the undefeated Russian giant, 7 foot tall Nikolai Valuev. And in this one, a lot of people thought Valuev was going to be the saving grace of the heavyweight division and destroy the much smaller John Ruiz. But Ruiz battled Valuev and made the fight close in Valuev's country. But Valuev would walk away with a close majority decision, ending John Ruiz's second reign as heavyweight champion. And Ruiz would have to start over again. But because of his long tenure with the WBA title, he was put right away into a final eliminator against undefeated Ruslan Shagayev in November of 2006. He would fight his ass off against Shagayev in a good back and forth battle, but Shagayev was able to weather Ruiz's style and walk away with a close split decision victory as Ruiz would come up short. He would come back and get a win over little known Otis Tisdale in October of 2007, and then would get an opportunity in March of 2008 against big-time Jamil McCline. And surprisingly, he would defeat Jamil McCline. It was kind of an ugly fight, another one in Ruiz's style, you know, another ugly kind of performance. But he would walk away with a clean 12-round unanimous decision and move on to another title shot. And in August of 2008, he would challenge Nikolai Valuev in a rematch for the vacant WBA heavyweight title. This time, Valuev would do just a little bit better than the first time, but this was another good, close fight. But Valuev would walk away with a unanimous decision this time. And that would be it for John Ruiz. Again, you know, at that moment, or so we thought, that was going to be his last attempt at a world title, but it was not. He would come back in November of 2009 and get another opportunity, or he would get his final victory of his career against a little-known guy named Adnan Sirin. And then he would get another opportunity at the heavyweight title in April of 2010 when he would challenge David Haye for the WBA heavyweight championship. Again, he would come up short, as this time he was not walking out with a close decision loss. He would get knocked out for the only time in a heavyweight title fight, as David Haye just was too good, too fast, and too strong, as he knocked John Ruiz out in 9 rounds to keep the title. So John Ruiz, you can say what you want about the guy, but the guy competed in 11 heavyweight title fights in 9 years of the heavyweight division. So almost every year he was in a title fight. He never unified belts because he really wasn't an attractive style. You know, Lennox didn't want nothing to do with him. Chris Bird and him were both promoted by Don King. It was an easy fight to make, but his style was so ugly they didn't want to make it. Layman Brewster, even at the time, was just an ugly style. Nobody wanted to fight him. And he lost his belt right before Vladimir Klitschko took off in his second and very significant 9-year run as champ. And the other brother, Vitaly, just didn't see the upside in fighting a guy with an ugly style, a guy that holds you like John Ruiz. So that's why he never really got a unification bout. But again, 11 title fights, and he finished with a record of 4-5-1 with 1 no contest. He defeated Evander Holyfield. That was his signature win, the victory over Evander Holyfield. But he grinded it out and defeated, and was in the ring with some good, solid heavyweights of that era. You know, a lot of good, solid heavyweights. He surprised a lot of heavyweights, defeating guys that people thought were going to beat him for sure. And he hung around with other guys that beat him, but people thought were going to beat the shit out of him. And that's why he kept getting opportunity after opportunity right there. So, say what you want about John Ruiz. I'm not sure how far he makes it in this tournament, but his style worked against a lot of heavyweights. And it was ugly. I didn't like it. I was not a fan of his. But it worked. And the guy was a significant heavyweight and a 2-time WBA champion. So, that's it. That's what I got. That is my number 13 heavyweight for my fantasy heavyweight tournament that I will be hosting, interactive tournament. The former 2-time WBA heavyweight champion, John the Quiet Man Ruiz. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, smash the like button, leave a comment, or subscribe to the channel. I appreciate any and all support. This is True Boxing. You've been hit with the truth.